guys, welcome to another episode of the 706 podcast. I am your host for the week, Tony. Before we get rolling here, I think we should all introduce ourselves one more time. Let's just go down the line.
Hey, this is Kirk.
This is Anthony.
I'm Connor.
We're all still here. We all made it. Back to the studio for another episode. So in case you missed last week, we decided to watch World's Greatest Dad. So real quick, I'm just going to lay down how things work over here. We're kind of figuring it out as we go, but the format we kind of stumbled upon last week is we'll introduce the movie that we've selected. We'll kind of go down the line, see what everybody thought, and then we'll just kind of talk about the movie, see how long that takes us. And then the three other people who did not pick the movie, so I am exempt. I cannot vote on this movie. These three guys will decide whether this is one of the 706 greatest movies of all time. If you remember last week, we did Spice World, and we did not select it. So.
Spice World is not in the list of 706.
707, a solid 707.
Yeah, we'll say it's the 707th place, so hopefully this will be higher than that. And also, at the very end of the episode, we discuss what movie to watch next week, and basically these guys are going to have to convince me what movie we're to watch, and I get to pick between their three nominations. So without further ado, let's talk about World's Greatest Dad. So this is a movie it's a dark comedy. It stars Robin Williams, and that's all you need to know. It's on Netflix. Go watch it. I say this because, and don't read the Netflix plot thing either, because even knowing the premise of the movie to me is a spoiler. I think this is a movie that is really best experienced with just as little foreknowledge as possible.
So are we going to talk about it, or
no? We are. No. We don't.
Like the credit sequence.
We're going to spoil the movies on these things because that's how you talk about a movie like grown-ups. But I'm just telling the listeners, if this is a movie you might want to see, that it may be advisable to walk out right now.
Put your laptop down now, and then pick it up again. Go on Netflix.
Exactly. If it's still up when we do this, we just watched it. But anyway, so now that that's out of the way, I'm just going to go into it and tell you the premise. So basically, to me, this is just a very catchy. It's super high concept for a dark comedy. It's a great dark comedy premise. Basically, Robin Williams plays this total sad sack, aspiring writer / poetry teacher. And basically, he has found no success. He's written 5 novels. He's sent them into places, and they've all been turned down by various publishers. And he lives kind of a meager little life. It's implied that, he is divorced, and he is raising his son. He seems to have sole custody of his teenage son, who attends the high school where he teaches. So basically, what happens is the son dies of autoerotic asphyxiation about a half hour into the movie. And the son, he's a huge jerk. Nobody at school likes him. Robin Williams loves him, but he doesn't like him, per se. He finds his son to be a real handful, a real pain in the ass. And basically what happens is Robin Williams ends up using his son's death. He stages it to be a conventional suicide, and he writes a fake suicide note. And the suicide note gains popularity, and he eventually writes this entire journal that his son supposedly wrote, and it gets published as a book, and he finds the success that he'd always dreamed of. So that's the premise of the movie. So, I like this movie. I've only seen it once before today, and I just thought it had a good premise, and it delivered on it for the most part. I do like Robin Williams a lot. I think this is, I don't want to say it's his best performance, but I do think it's one of his stronger performances. Definitely a good late career performance from Robin Williams, who I think is one of the few kind of comedy actors who really succeeded in crossing over into drama. I think if you think of all those guys, he is the one who had the most success. And what else about this movie before we get too deep into it? And yeah, I just picked it because I thought it was kind of interesting and discussable, and I thought it'd be fun to watch with this gang, these guys. So let's just go down the line. First of all, we got Kirk. So Kirk, if you remember last week, he picked among our 3 choices to watch this movie. So, Kirk, are you regretting your decision right now?
No, question mark. I did. I'm very torn about this movie. I did enjoy it. I did find myself connecting with the characters. I found enjoyment in the various ironies and intricacies of the plot. And the conceit is very, very original. But that being said, I do wish the movie had been stuck to its guns a little bit more. I wish it would have been a true drama. I feel like the comedy there only served to dilute the dramatic element. But I mean, at the same time, it did add something. It just wasn't the something I was looking for. And perhaps I come into it looking at it. Well, like for instance, when he finds his son, Robin Williams. There's a great scene where he's very emotionally expressive. You know, he's obviously found his son dead. He's crying, and that held a lot of weight because Robin Williams, the way he the way he committed suicide. So that there's some real moments of emotional magnitude, but they were quickly, almost abruptly, interrupted by sometimes baseless comedy. So that's just my quick take, but I'll pass it over to Anthony. I want to hear what the rest of the gang has to say. Maybe I'm unfounded, but
no, I think Kirk, first of all, before I get to my own opinion, brought up an interesting point. Is anyone who loves looking into an artist's work and comparing it with their life, I think this movie is certainly ripe for that sort of interpretation. I myself are going to try to stick away from that unless we bring it up later.
I don't want to get too much into that.
Yeah, I think there's something there if that's what you're interested in. But so to start off, or to preface this discussion, though, for myself, I had seen this movie once a couple years ago, and I remember also thinking that this was kind of a unique, original idea the director here stumbled upon. Robin Williams gives a great performance, of course, but the second time around, the first time around, I kind of left thinking it was okay. It didn't really stick with me, and the second time around, I remember I watched it here with the gang, and I just thought, this is garbage. This is not a good movie. It has a great set of points it sets out to make, and it never achieves any of them. The director crafts this kind of tale very poorly, and Robin Williams, it's almost just sad to see how underutilized he is in this role. I mean, there's potential here for him to really exploit these kind of points that I think the director sets up in the beginning and then just lets out and forgets about him as it goes on. And, I'm going to move to Connor, though. I don't want to be too cynical in the beginning of the show.
We're 7.5 minutes in and we got the G word. For everyone waiting, take a shot. So, all right, let's hopefully Connor.
Well, tough act to follow. I mean, I'm very much, I can't say in the original after you guys. I think you guys really kind of said it, or you've hit on some of the key points here. I mean, such an interesting premise, such a provocative, irreverent idea. Yes. And the movie's even more irreverent and interesting in the way that it treats this whole thing as a huge comedy. And it's very cynical. It is very dark. It is while it does have some emotional moments and some triumphant moments, some real kind of moments of realization, we do get at the end, we get kind of a message, the chasing this kind of this empty fame, this sort of self-aggrandizing impulse. It's so empty and it can't go on. The movie's very kind of heightened and dreamlike. It is very comic. It is extremely comic, and I think as Kirk said, it makes a point of being comical, while also trying to have this emotional depth to it. When I first heard of the premise, I admit I was spoiled for the premise a long time ago, and I imagined this as a drama, and I always found it very interesting. But mainly it is this really irreverent, dark comedy, and it's very interesting for that reason, and it manages to kind of to make you really engage, and it makes you kind of loathe a lot of the characters.
Yes.
In a way that I think it's important to the movie to do that. However, somehow it feels a little bit cheaper than it could have been if it was a pure drama, but we can't go into that. What would it be like if it was a pure drama? Different movie. But, I think, and Robin Williams, he's the master of... because, I know, we know about him and we know about his story. He is an actor who does, even at his funniest, he has a sadness to him, And that really does come through, but it's kind of, was he perfect for this? I'm not sure, because...
I think he's great. I can't imagine anyone else. One interesting note is that, trivia time, guys, he actually was not, he was just going to be a minor role in the movie. I'm not sure which one, but... he was impressed with the script, and he was friends with the director, who is Bobcat Goldthwait. He's made a number of other decent movies. And basically, Robin was like, no, I want to play the lead, because he was really into the script. But I really like him in this, and I think the when you talk about the dreaminess, the dream-like, whatever, I agree. It is. It's very much like almost as though, and I'm biased because this is the sort of stuff I kind of like to write myself, is where it kind of plays almost like the fantasy of this scenario, where like you can imagine Robin Williams like sitting in a chair and imagining how this would unfold, and there's a very kind of this very dark but very indulgent fantasy of like he hates his son but he loves his son, and he kind of wishes his son would just be off his hands and that he could use that to like his own to for his own gain. It's just the most selfish kind of evil fantasy a person can have, and it is very dark. So I think that's kind of one way to read the movie. But I find the dreaminess of it, I find that very relatable and very funny. There's just notes in this movie that I think are just comedically so they're just little things like every excerpt we get of the book, like every bit we hear of the book, to me, it's like everyone's talking about how genius it is, but the book is terrible. Mm-hmm. It's so over dramatic, it's so melodramatic, it's just such bad writing, but everyone's saying it's like great writing, and it plays like the most absurd way this thing could play out, and I really enjoy that on a subjective, just like comedy level. But I think there is other stuff going on. But I mean, I don't think you guys found it particularly funny. I didn't think you guys really.
Well, I guess I'll start. One, I think a lot of the jokes for me just did not ring because I feel like I've just seen him so many times. Oh my God, Mike! I hated that character.
Which one's Mike?
Mike is the teacher who is also interested in the Claire. Is her name right? Claire?
Yes, it's Claire.
It's kind of this guy who at the beginning of the movie has the sort of things that Robin Williams' character wants. He just got published in the New Yorker. He's kind of this athletic guy. He's very popular among the students. And yet, as soon as Robin Williams starts to claim, he kind of gets relegated to this role of just like comedic one-note guy who's, I almost like feel like this would be like a trash joke in like Parks and Rec for Jerry. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it sucks.
Okay.
Like, none of these characters are fully fleshed out to
so you like him okay at the beginning, but you don't.
No, I don't like him at the beginning either. Like, I
beginning.
think none of these characters are fleshed out, and that this movie is trying to be this sort of dark comedy, but it never gets dark enough to sort of justify its comedic undertones. But
it never gets dark enough. I mean, it's dark.
It does not, I think, get dark enough to achieve that.
What would be a darker version of this then?
Well,
what do you imagine?
Okay, I was saving this for later, but the movie was loosely inspired by this sort of famous short story by Chuck Palahniuk, who published a story called Guts in Playboy magazine.
Yes, I know.
About it's a story of 3 loosely interconnected tales about masturbation and these kind of like suicidal after effects of people who just accidentally kill themselves in the set. And this is a story I think the movie is trying to aim for. It doesn't have the kind of Chuck undertones. Like
that story is very kind of gory and like shocking and like really goes for like kind of the gross out shock value factor. That's really not this movie. For me, it's just more about kind of the fantasy element of it, just the indulgent.
But even the fantasy element, when you say he's selfish, I don't really get that. I feel like it's a little morally complicated. Fantasy. But I mean, the selfishness is born out of this desire. Like, he says at the end, "I hate my son, but it's okay. I loved him too." I mean, the idea that you're gonna write this note is not only selfish for yourself because you want to protect your offspring, your child. It is also, I mean, then you have the idea that he's gonna use this to further his career. I think it's a little bit more morally complicated than just to say this is a selfish guy.
I don't think no. He's very human, and it really makes us kind of buy him and feel for him before the movie. The premise doesn't kind of kick in for about 30 or 40 minutes. I had forgotten how long it took to actually get to that, how long his son is actually alive in the story, right. Which I think works to the film's advantage.
Goes on for a while. I wish it had been a bit quicker, but go on, Kirk.
Oh, I was just going to say, the character really, Robin Williams' character didn't ring for me. It was acted well as it could have been, as well as it was written. There was definitely a ceiling there. Like, I feel like I would not have missed anything from this movie had Richard Kind or Steve Buscemi been in the place of Robin Williams. I really don't. I really feel like this was not the best use of his talents. It was neither dramatic enough nor comedic enough for me to really see him shine through. And right after the death, I do like looking at it from a humanistic perspective. Like, I want I want to empathize with, obviously, with the main character, with the protagonist, but we didn't get to see his grieving process. We're not even told how much time has passed before his son's suicide note is published. It's found out and published. I wanted more context. I wanted to be able to really dig into the psyche, the psychic processes of Robin Williams' character, and I feel like I was not afforded that opportunity.
So for me, the kind of the contrivance of because it is very contrived how the suicide note gets passed around, someone found the police report, which apparently included the suicide note. It's very kind of contrived. It's not very convincing, and we don't see much of the grief. But for me, that's all explained away again by just kind of the fantasy element. This is playing your fantasy. You're kind of a fantasy you would feel terrible about for having, right, as a parent, is the idea, I think. It's kind of this dark thing that, presumably we have inside us that we might think about in our darkest hour, which is kind of how I read the movie. So, to me, those things, I don't really get hung up on. I think they work. For the movie to do what it is supposed to do, I think those things are sort of irrelevant, personally. But
Mr. Apologist here, but let's hear
I
from
mean,
Connor.
I know,
Connor,
but
you have to respond to everything.
I don't know. I mean, I think we can kind of, say all we want about our opinions about, whether what worked or not. I mean, I'd like to talk about what really is the movie trying to say.
Yeah, yes, please.
Okay.
What's the movie
He's
trying to say?
He's pulling out a scroll right now. Those of you who can't see.
Well, no, I mean, and I'm struggling. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think because it's just. I mean, it is. Yes, I mean, it is. It's almost purely psychological movie. It is the fantasy of this one man. We can't always kind of take it. Yeah, but there is something interesting too about this whole. I don't know, this idea of human nature, and is it just. Kind of the sort of the really messed up part about this movie is this kid dies, and everybody hates him in real life, and then as soon as Robin Williams writes this sappy suicide note and all of his kind of his thoughts and his notes to himself, then everybody shifts around and everybody becomes obsessed with him. The son becomes kind of like this kind of martyr, this icon that everyone, all the girls come up to Robin Williams and say, "Can I have his old stuff?" The people become obsessed with him. So is it interesting? Is that just the Robin Williams character's cynical view of things, or what is the movie kind of trying to say to us about that? I don't know. You guys have any thoughts? Or other themes?
Well, for me, I think the obvious one on the surface is the movie's trying to just poke fun at this human tendency to paint a very nostalgic, rosy picture of those who die before us or around us, and to kind of supplement or forget these faults for qualities that we wish to experience in our own lives. But what I find very interesting is that, one, the movie's very cinephiliac in its references. There's a lot of kind of points and homages to scenes and films around it. And one of the things that Robin Williams' character constantly brings up is zombies. I think it's this idea that human beings can haunt us long after they have since gone away, and that in these movies, in these zombie movies, these human beings are coming back to haunt us in a kind of personal level. And what the movie's trying to say is that just as zombies can haunt us and scare us, the same thing could happen to a more real situation, that humans are capable of taking on these sort of zombie characteristics. And whether it achieves that is a different story. But anyone have other themes? Or
We'll talk about one thing. I sort of forgot about this now as I'm going back through the movie. There's one really interesting sequence where there's a lot of montages in this movie. This makes a lot of use of time-lapse and montage. Silent except for music, and it's a very brisk soundtrack. We get a very memorable use of the song Under Pressure at the end.
Did we need Robin Williams' ass at the end of another movie? Really? I mean,
What's wrong
no
with
spoilers, but that's two
what was the other
movies
one?
I've seen his ass at the end of, and
Well,
that's too many.
We only watch movies on this podcast where we see a man's butt. That's the rule we decided at the beginning.
he's trying to catch up to Kate Winslet.
Yeah, so very interesting sequence kind of in the middle of the movie where after the sort of the suicide note has been published in the school newspaper and everybody's reading it, and we see it does a thing that it never does at any other point, where it tries to communicate what the people are thinking Tries to actually get in the heads of these characters, these kind of stereotypical school characters that we have around the school, and they actually see sort of visions of the son, sort of in his ideal form.
Yes.
The goth kid, the goth girl, reads it, kind of looks up dreamily, and then sees a ghost of the kid. And now he has goth makeup on, or he's very brooding. He's whatever. He's smoking a cigarette, whatever. So that's a very weird moment, and it's very winking at the audience. Like actually, the ghost actually looks at the audience. He's a lot of weird expressions. It's kind of like he's almost like he's trying to say something to us. And what is it? But
they all look at the audience. There's a bit in the montage. There's a very music video feeling this sequence.
It's very music video.
But every character reading this journal or the note or whatever, they all look up to the camera. They look at us. So, but anyway.
I also want to comment though on that transformation Robin Williams experiences at that end that Kirk just brought up about him being naked. Because in the beginning of the movie, he makes a comment about how he always feared the worst thing was to be alone. And in those later scenes that follow, especially in the first third or act, he's constantly dressed in these clothes that are way too baggy for him, as these characters are constantly on the side of him. It's just the way the mise-en-scene's always set up. And it's like, this is a guy who's just engulfed by people around him. There's no way for him to really express himself. He's just literally dragged down by the baggage on him. And as the movie gets to its second act, where he begins experiencing fame, these clothes become a lot nicer, a lot tighter, a lot more slim-fitting, a lot more attractive to his sort of qualities. And at the very end, he sheds all that, and he comments now that he goes, I no longer think it's bad to be alone. It's this sort of idea that maybe it's like Jean Saut's point. I think hell is other people. And that's why they would rather look to the dead. I mean, they're watching a zombie movie at the end, and he has to go to the water to experience sort of rebirth, to just get away from the sort of connections that we make as we get older.
Yeah.
Interesting.
No, the hell is other people thing, and I think in a way that's the message of the movie. There's the kind of it is very cynical, and I think it's predominant. If I were to express a theme, I think the predominant theme is just kind of the human selfishness, and how, especially with with deaths in general, I think celebrity deaths. This was a movie that makes me think a lot about celebrity deaths, and just kind of how we make them about ourselves. Like everyone, at the school who's talking about Robin Williams, the obvious example, because he, tries to use it to advance his career, but to a lesser extent, all the other characters in the movie are they're riding this kind of this hype train about this dead kid. They're all very excited. They're very excited to be part of this movement, or they're all fans of him. One gets a tattoo. They're wearing shirts. They have pins. It's like he's a band or a brand or something. And I think that's kind of what it's saying, is the way we tend to make these things, these human tragedies we hear about on the news, particularly with regards to celebrities or people whose art we enjoy. We tend to make them. It's more about us than it is about them, or we don't really know those people. I mean, that we sort of do in a way, but it's we make it about us in a way that, in a way, it's sort of selfish. It's we're trying to bring ourselves closer to them in a way that's kind of unwarranted. I didn't phrase that very well, but that's sort of what I think. I feel like this is sort of a true thing, that whenever a celebrity dies, and also just stuff like Michael Jackson, where the media just hated this guy. They talked about him he was a sicko. He did all these horrible things, and then when he died, he became this saint. And it is a little disgusting, honestly. So that's kind of what I think of. But any thoughts, Kurt?
I don't know. I don't necessarily look at the communal or societal picture in the movie. I just look particularly closely at the relationship between Robin Williams' character and his son. I like how, I did enjoy the movie, and I like how practiced the protagonist Robin Williams is in the art of self-deception. He's very good at crafting, using his son's death to craft that which he never had, but he had always wanted. And he was very passive at the beginning, but this was an act of assertion. So I could appreciate that, and there were some transformative elements there within that. But I did find that I wanted more context. I wanted to and I know these are my own personal proclivities, but I would have liked to have met Kyle's mother. I mean, what's going on there? I know that's the central focus is the father-son relationship, or perhaps, as you said, the idea of celebrity and mortality. But I don't know. I did want a little bit of more humanistic context, but I guess that's that's why it is a dark comedy. Because we're not afforded that. So
yeah, I mean the characters in this movie are extremely flat, but as we've said, except for Robin Williams, Lance is his name. We just call him Robin Williams, but with the exception of him, and we understand him to be sort of the subject. He's us. He's the I. He's the character we can we're in his head. However, like I said, a lot of the other characters are very flat, almost to the point of being dreamlike characters. So basically one of the huge inciting kind of dramatic issues in the movie is his jealousy. Because he has this teacher at the school he has a secret kind of relationship with, and he's very jealous that he sees her at the mall, hanging out with the other teacher that we mentioned, his rival. And she's a very flat character. She just kind of goes along. She's just a breeze. She goes back and forth, and it's all his kind of, one thing he has to do is he has to win her. By doing all this stuff and writing the suicide note in the book and etc. So, but like I said, so then it's difficult. It's almost like we have to throw that out the window. We can't really psychologize these characters too much because they're kind of just figments of a Robin Williams's imagination in some way. Lance's, ours, that sort of thing.
What did you guys think of like the technical aspects of the movie? I did enjoy. I thought it had a brilliant soundtrack. It's a
great.
Weird amalgamation of songs and genres, but I really thought it fit well, and all the songs found their own place within the movie.
It's one of those soundtracks where, and I have kind of mixed feelings about this. I think about this for like, if I were to make a movie, what songs would I include or whatever? Because it's just like, obviously they're just songs the director, Bobcat Goldthwait, he's really into. There's actually a cameo by Chris Novoselic, bassist for Nirvana, by the way.
The director's band had opened at one point in the early Seattle years.
Oh, we're having trivia off, I see. His mother was Kurt Cobain's lover. They're just songs the artist really likes. I think some work better than others. There's a view that as they went on, I kind of enjoyed them more. There is a lot of music in this movie. And it's just kind of your mileage may vary issue. It really depends on how much you like the songs. Mm-hmm. I like them all right. I don't think I like them as much as you guys maybe, but I like some of them. I think, what's the last one? Under Pressure. It's a great song, of course. It's a fine way to end the movie. But, I don't know.
Well, honestly, I mean, I think as much as I like the songs themselves, I'm sure you could have just taken the soundtrack and placed it in, like, any indie, like, coming-of-age romance movie. It would have worked in any scene as long as you placed them well.
Many car commercials.
There were some car commercial-y moments here, I think so, yes.
But also car commercial-like is the visuals, and that's not a bad thing. I love car commercial visuals. No, by this I mean, this is not really true of most car commercials. A very colorful movie. The mise-en-scène is very good and very well put together. A lot of just control of what's going on and sort of in the environment.
It's very bright. It's very clean, cleanly shot. Nothing too whacked out or experimental. I mean, the most striking thing I think in terms of the craft is the use of montages. I think that's kind of the most unusual. Just the editing and that sort of thing. There was one scene, the scene where he does find his son, is kind of interestingly lit. We just see kind of the side of his face. We just see the moonlight on his face. And it's kind of, I think, the most memorable kind of image from the movie. And we just see Robin Williams. And we don't hear his voice. We don't hear his, or Lance. Sorry.
No. I was going to say the most memorable image is his butt.
it's up there. But no, we see the moonlight kind of on the side of Lance's face. And we see him kind of wail, but we don't hear it, I think the score is playing. I don't remember what's playing.
Yeah.
And I know we don't hear him. Or do we hear him?
No, we do not.
We do not. You don't hear him. It's completely silent. The music takes over.
I took umbrage with the ending sequence, or actually the penultimate sequence where he's in the pool and his baptismal. No, well, not just because of the nudity, but it's like it's shot in slow motion. It's almost insufferable. It's like, oh my gosh, can we lay off the melodrama.
Did it feel like pretentious? Or like over the
It
top?
felt like
It's a bit heavy-handed,
Here's a
maybe.
final push. Oh, come on,
Yeah.
Sundance, we can do it.
They really emphasize. They really do emphasize. Like they really do push that it's. They try to sell us that it's a happy ending very hard. They do try to be like, this is the most triumphant happy ending you will ever see, which to me is like. I could have dealt with something a little more
Not completely.
ambiguous.
They want you to really feel it. They want you to be right there with him as he's jumping into the pool.
It doesn't quite. It doesn't quite.
Yeah,
work
and
for
it
me.
doesn't
I
quite
like the
land.
movie, but that
Yeah,
doesn't really sell itself as the most triumphant, beautiful thing that it thinks it is.
That scene, I think, actually troubles the whole point the movie's stressed this whole time of making.
Yeah.
Honestly, yes. I mean, I think this goes back to the zombie point of. I mean, even other movies they reference Young Frankenstein. This idea that human being can be brought up. Created out of our own thing, given a context as we prescribe it. But what's funny is they don't bring up Frankenstein, they bring up Young Frankenstein, the comedic take on it. This idea that life that we create could eventually just become a joke. And it's funny, though, because Robin Williams has created this thing that is, for us, a viewer, a joke. And I think that's what it's supposed to be.
It's a comedy.
As a comedy,
Yeah,
it's
okay.
a comedy for us to take in, and it's a way for us to experience how we kind of relegate different experiences or characteristics to the people around us. And then by jumping in the water, and it's saying he's going to start over. I have a hard time thinking about that if the whole idea is that suicide is a permanent solution to the temporary problem. So how different is his rebirth really here?
Well, what do you mean? How different is it? Like, what, you don't believe that he could go on? And like,
No, I mean, it's funny though because he does go on. I mean, I talked about the ending before. He's watching a zombie movie. I mean, it's funny because he's watching it with the two people who are still somewhat accepting of him. It's his son's best friend and Bonnie, the kind of strange but lovable neighbor next door.
Yeah.
And what do? They watch a zombie movie. This idea that, well, even though they have each other in this kind of immediate community, they'd still rather watch a movie about the dead haunting the living. That they'd still rather be surrounded by the dead experiences taking over.
There's also the fact that Night of the Living Dead's in the public domain. So that might be why they're
There's
watching.
also that. I
giving
really
this Bobcat
appreciate.
No.
Too much
See,
credit.
I think that's okay. I think he did think about this.
No, I really
yeah.
appreciate the close reading and talking about other texts. I really appreciate that, Anthony. I mean, as we think about it, it does complicate the movie in a kind of crazy way. I interpret it just as, wacky movies, good taste.
Oh, yeah, I'm
wacky
cool.
movies. Yeah.
You make your own family. Hashtag live on.
I'm just trying to
Girl
give
power.
faith to this guy.
Yeah.
No,
this
it's
movie.
great.
He should hire you.
Bobcat?
Even though you call this movie garbage, but
Still, he's,
Well-crafted,
he's the only one
well-thought-out
who really
garbage.
reads it.
Yeah, maybe Bobcat will be thrilled with his reading and not ours. He actually gave a shit. He actually really watched the movie.
Maybe it's purposely this way, yes.
But,
Not a fault.
we are at about 33 minutes, so I think it is time to decide. I have a feeling I know how Anthony's going to vote, but let's start with Kirk. Kirk, you picked this movie. Do you think it is one of the 706 greatest movies of all time?
That's a tough question, Tony. And don't we have such a gracious host this week? I must say. Yes. I don't know. To boil it down, this movie, I prefer deductive movies. I prefer movies that start with themes and motifs and then nail out the plot points later. I feel like this was just two frat guys sitting around smoking weed. Hey man, so the guy walks in and his son's dead. He's been jerking off. Yeah, let's make a quick buck, man. And
I
then
don't
they
think
throw in these
that's interesting.
heavy-handed elements at the end. It's very inductive.
I cannot disagree.
Can I talk? Can I
I'm
speak?
so
All
sorry.
right, yes,
I'm
thank
sorry.
you. I believe this is
get
where
the
we are
R points.
empowered this year. That being said, I will begrudgingly say that this is one of the 706 best movies of all time.
Really?
And I don't really know why, so let's just move on.
Don't try to persuade him, Anthony. Don't.
No,
You said
my
it's
vote is
locked.
set in
It's
stone.
in the chiseled. It's
That
chiseled.
took a
Well, I mean-
left turn.
Yeah, that was a Twilight Zone level twist right
Yeah,
there.
you said like, it's a bunch of drunk frat guys, morons. They made one of the best movies ever.
One of the 706 best movies ever. Well, I think you guys know which way my vote's going to go, but as a final complaint about the movie, I just want to bring up the supporting cast because we never really got there. Outside of brief little comments, is that the supporting cast is completely flat, and I don't know if it's quite dreamlike for me. I think it's these idea that, you know, these are characters who're supposed to fit these stereotypes, but the problem is by leaving them in stereotypes, it doesn't really give us an impact of how this kind of nostalgic or rosy improvement of someone who died is truly affecting. And I'm going to leave it there and say no.
All right.
Yeah, I love sitting on this end of the table. I get to make the final call. So, Rob Williams put in a great performance. The characterization is so flat. The jokes don't always land for me. I have to say no.
Looks like
we only have 706. I can't just,
All right,
0 for 2.
We did turn down Spice World, which was entertaining as well. So I can see it. We're being tough on it. We're being tough on it because we love it. At least, maybe not in Anthony's case, but in the rest of our
But it was a very interesting movie, super discussable. I think this is what the 706 podcast should be.
I just want to add, too, if you ever disagree or feel inclined to comment, there is a section on our podcast site, and feel free to do so.
Yes, we'd love to hear from you. All right,
so it is now time to pick next week's movie. So if you guys are familiar, I've been waiting. These guys all week have been teasing me about what they're gonna pick. I am very intrigued. I think there might be some backroom deals going on based on how this voting system works. All I know is that Kirk has been very down on himself. He's like, I'm never gonna pick a movie that you'll pick. I'll never do it. So
let's start with Connor.
You want to start with Connor?
Yeah, he always goes
last.
last.
Whatever gives me the better chance.
Yeah.
I don't think. All right, fine. Connor, what do you
want? I usually go last. Okay, my pick for next week is Little Big Man.
Oh,
okay.
A movie that I am super duper fond of. It's a movie that got me into movies. And a little bit of background, 1970. It is a movie that is historical. It is a Western. It is picaresque. It is crazy. It is broad. It's adventures. Dennis Hopper? No, sorry, Dustin Hoffman. Dustin Hoffman and his adventures in the West. And this is what we call a revisionist Western. This is a movie that tells you as much about the Old West, or in fact, tells you more about its own time than it does about the Old West. It's a fascinating movie, and I think you guys will really enjoy it.
You should do the TCM introduction.
Ben McKenzie here.
Ben Mankiewicz.
I just call everyone Dennis Hopper.
Well, I kind of hope Connor gets it now. I've been really wanting to watch that movie, but I'm going to go with... Let's start by prefacing this and saying there's a great actress around today.
Like, I'm fucking done. He's just like, he's throwing his hands up. He's like, I'm done.
So the movie I chose, I think one of the reasons as we do this show, I really want to do movies that I think our viewers have either seen or have been inclined to see. I want to keep our show a little bit more populous in that sense. And the movie I chose is from 2006. It is a great movie of that time. I think it belongs in any list of the great movies to have come out since 2000 and of all time, honestly. And what I chose is Alfonso Cuarón's Children of Men.
How did I not guess?
Children of Men.
He's been teasing me.
This is a movie ripe for various discussion interpretations. I know Tony's seen it, but I think this is just an excellent movie.
How many of us have seen this one? Oh, so 3 of the 4 of us have seen it. Okay, that does it's going to factor in, I think.
Oh, what?
But I don't know how. We'll see. Kirk, all right, what do you...
All right, so I will just posit my suggestion here. I chose to go with a quaint little movie, very nicely done. Trans-Siberian came out in 2009, I believe. Woody Harrelson, Emily Mortimer, directed by Brad Anderson, who also directed The Machinist.
It's a great movie.
Oh, Ben Kingsley, great supporting role.
I've never heard of this. What is this?
It's a really good movie.
Well, the basic, very, very simplistic idea of the plot is that Woody Harrelson and his wife Emily Mortimer are missionaries in Beijing, and they decide to take the Trans-Siberian Railroad back to Moscow to fly home to America. And on the way, they become involved in a very cat and mouse game with the Russian authorities, and there's some elements of drug smuggling and deceit, identity, cultural tension and dissonance, and also murder. So It has some of everything, and I think it's beautifully shot. It's really well done movie. So that's my
Go Kirk.
All right, so that wasn't a Hawaii. You sit down yourself. That's a fine pick.
That's a good.
All right,
Final
so
arguments.
we got to do the rebuttals / final arguments.
So let me say the rules for this rebuttal. Anything goes. I can say anything I want. I said, without having seen it, I said that World's Greatest Dad was the tragedy of Robin Williams' life. And I didn't mean that. Okay, I didn't know that for a fact when I said it, but like I said, I can say anything. So let me just say this. I've seen both of these movies. They're both good movies, sure. They're both good. Children of Men, it's interesting, it's long, it's heavy, very self-serious kind of movie. If you like post-apoc, it's one you should watch. Trans-Siberian, it is interesting. It's just there's not a whole lot of meat on those bones. It's a very good movie. It's a very well done movie, but there's not a lot of meat on those bones for discussion. Very effective. If you want to study film, it's a great thing to look at. Little Big Man, it's historical. It's huge. It's got laughs. It's the one movie that goes from the most dark to the most hilarious. I mean, it's an amazing movie, and also I think we need to represent. Maybe it may or may not be time to go back into the past a little bit. Look at some American film history.
Yeah. Okay.
Those are very fair points. I think Children of Men is actually a much shorter movie, though. Little Big Man. Just want to say that.
It's pretty easy to find.
Superficial, find right there. I've also seen both of these movies, and honestly,
Wow.
I would not be troubled if either of them got picked over mine. But I think Children of Men is more relevant than ever, given the current discussion in politics around sort of this migration and European downfall, this sort of rise of the East over the West, and other kind of like societal issues I think we could find. I think the movies also too often just discuss as sort of this post-apocalyptic tale. I think there's a very human angle that too often gets left out. And I would love to hear what we at the table would have to say about that. Mm-hmm. And in terms of Kirk movie, I really admired. I really admired his approach.
I'm treated like a Make-A-Wish kid here.
I'm really admired, and I'm a little proud of the movie he chose. I'm excited.
Well, let me just say,
but Children of Men is the movie to go with.
All right. Good.
So I heard, what sounded like the plot to Lone Ranger over here, with Johnny Depp, and then like 3 Men and a Baby over here. I didn't really know what was going on, but I believe my movie is the best.
You
Woody
haven't seen them. They've all seen all of them.
I've
more
seen them.
qualified.
I've heard. If you've heard them, you've seen them. They're those kinds.
Kirk picked Spice World. Let's leave it on that note.
Okay. So here's my thought. This is tough. I gotta say, they're all intriguing. I think Children of Men is very tempting because it is a movie that I do love, and I have not seen in years, and I've been meaning to rewatch it for a long time. However, 3 of us have seen it. And I would rather see him watch a movie that fewer of us have seen. I'm more about kind of the raw, kind of off the cuff, immediate reactions. Kind of, as tempting as it is. In Trans-Siberian, like it sounds interesting. It sounds fun, but Kirk, come on.
Three of us have seen it.
It's a truly good movie.
It's a great movie.
3 of us have seen it. Exactly. I would be the only one who hasn't seen it. I believe that it's a good movie. However, I do think we should kind of mix up the eras a little bit. I wasn't quite as sold on. I think Connor just argued for Little Big Man very persuasively. It's a little bit. It feels a little meatier. It's older. It's interesting. It's got Dennis Hopper. So I think that we're going Little Big Man again. So all right. So I'm very excited. So I think our plan right now, because next week is. The day where you meet your family and you.
That's 2 weeks away.
It's 2 weeks away, man.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, so we will be back next week. We'll be back next week to talk about Little Big Man, and we'll see you then. Thanks for listening.
Happy Thanksgiving!
Happy Turkey Day!
Yeah.
Dennis Hopper.
Next Thursday.
Hey guys, a lot of people ask me for TV recommendations. Tony, what are some good shows to watch? I have nothing to do with my life. So I tell them, there are a lot of great shows to watch. You go to the Entertainment Weekly list, you go to the TV Guide list, and they say, Tony, those shows are all 80, 100 episodes long. Why aren't good shows shorter? Why aren't their lengths more reasonable? Well, I have a streaming service for you. It's called skipit.edu. And for only $16 a month, skipit.edu will let you select any series of your choice. You have Breaking Bad, you got Mad Men, you got Friends, you got Joey, you got The Simpsons. And the series finale of The Simpsons isn't even out yet. It lets you skip to the series finale of the series.
That's how I watch TV.
So you can say you've watched the show, and people will ask, oh yeah, how does it end? And you'll know. With skipit.edu. Only $16 a month. And if you enter the coupon code, the 706, that's TH7ZEROSIXXX, exclamation point, 4 times. But those are the words 4 times, not 4 exclamation points. And you'll get $15 off your first month. So that'll be just $1 for the first month. And then double that for each successive month. That's skipit.edu. Thanks for listening.